If you are enrolled in employee benefits through EGI, you may want to make changes to those benefits. This video is going to cover the types of changes that can be made with different qualifying events. What is a qualifying event? A qualifying event is something that allows you to make changes to your insurance coverage outside of the open enrollment period. First of all, if you wish to make a change to your benefits through our office, you must supply documentation which supports or verifies your qualifying event. For example, if you are adding a new spouse, a marriage certificate is required. If you are adding a newborn child, a birth certificate is required. We cannot cover any of your dependents without verifying they are indeed eligible based on our requirements. All submissions for additions or changes have deadlines associated with them. For a qualifying event, you have 60 days from the date of the event to submit your request for a change. This can be done with paper applications or our online benefit portal. The deadline for the supporting documentation is within 30 days from the date of the application deadline. So if you were to wait as long as possible, documentation is due within 90 days of the event. Please keep in mind, however, that while you have these 60 days to elect the change, if you delay your enrollment and documentation, it will most likely result in you owing some back premiums. Another potential issue is that you could have a gap in coverage if you delay. For example, if your spouse loses their job and their coverage ends July 31st and you submit your application in August, we will make the change to your coverage with us effective September 1st. All coverage, unless specified differently, will start the first of the month following the receipt date of your application. Just like all qualifying events, adoption has a 60-day application deadline and then a 30-day documentation deadline. Coverage for the adopted child begins on the date of petition for adoption or the placement date. This event also allows you to add other eligible dependents. Documentation for this event is the adoption paperwork showing petition for adoption or date of placement. Due to the addition of a newly acquired dependent, if you previously did not take optional dental or vision for yourself, the employee, this would be your opportunity to add these as well. If you take it at this time, any waiting period you had is null. But if you wait till open enrollment, you may be denied due to waiting periods. If you, yourself, meaning the employee, did not take health coverage when first eligible, you can now enroll because you have acquired a new dependent. You and your dependents would be covered effective the first of the month following receipt of your application. Birth of a child. Just like all qualifying events, birth of a child has a 60-day application deadline and then a 30-day documentation deadline. Coverage begins on the date of birth for the newborn. This event also allows you to add other eligible dependents, and their coverage will begin the first of the month following your application receipt date. Documentation for birth of a child is the birth certificate. If you add other dependents, you will need their birth or marriage certificates. Just like adoption, due to the addition of a newly acquired dependent, if you previously did not take optional dental or vision for yourself, the employee, this would be your opportunity to add these as well. If you take it at this time, again, any waiting period you had is null, but if you wait till open enrollment, you may be denied due to waiting periods. Again, if you, yourself, meaning the employee, did not take health coverage when first eligible, you can now enroll because you have acquired a new dependent. You and your dependents would be covered effective the first of the month following the receipt of your application. Just like all qualifying events, marriage has a 60-day application deadline and then a 30-day documentation deadline. Coverage begins on the date of marriage for the new spouse and any stepchildren. This event also allows you to add other eligible dependents, and their coverage will begin the first of the month following your application receipt date. Documentation for this event is a marriage certificate for the new spouse. If adding other dependents, you will need their birth certificates. Just like adoption and birth, due to the addition of a newly acquired dependent, if you previously did not take optional dental or vision for yourself, the employee, this would be your opportunity to add these as well. If you take it at this time, any waiting period you had, again, is null, but if you wait until open enrollment, you may be denied due to waiting periods. And once again, if you, yourself, meaning the employee, did not take health coverage when first eligible, you can now enroll because you have acquired a new dependent. You and your dependents would be covered effective the first of the month following receipt of your application. Divorce requires you to drop your ex-spouse and any stepchildren only. You are not permitted to drop your own children unless you are paying premiums on a post-tax basis. Coverage would end at the end of the month the divorce was final. If you lost coverage or want to add benefits through our office, even if you previously waived coverage, this is a qualifying event that would allow you to add benefits up to and including health, flex reimbursement accounts, life and voluntary life insurance, vision, ambulance coverage, and optional dental outside of any waiting periods and/or underwriting requirements for yourself and for any previously eligible dependents. Your application must be submitted within 60 days from the date your divorce is finalized. Documentation required is your divorce decree, the first page, and any pages containing signatures. If you are adding eligible dependent children at this time as well, we will need copies of their birth certificates. All supporting documentation is due 30 days from the application deadline. Coverage will go into effect the first month following the receipt of the application and the date the divorce is finalized. Just like all qualifying events, loss of coverage has a 60-day application deadline and then a 30-day documentation deadline. Documentation is required to verify your loss of coverage. The documentation needs to verify who lost coverage, when coverage ended, what type of coverage ended, and why coverage ended. Coverage would be effective the first of the month following both the receipt of your applications and the event. Dropping your other coverage during their open enrollment period is considered a voluntary drop, and you would not be allowed to add to our plan unless you are also adding our plan during our open enrollment. Obtaining coverage with someone else is also a qualifying event. The usual deadlines pertain to this event as well. In order to drop state coverage, documentation is needed to verify who obtained coverage, when coverage began, what type of coverage started, and why coverage began. Obtaining other coverage must be because you are newly eligible for it. If you have obtained other coverage because it's open enrollment with the other coverage, that is not a qualifying event, as it's not because you are newly eligible. Coverage end date would be the end of the month following both the receipt of applications and the event. While post-tax isn't really a qualifying event per se, it does allow you to make changes, and they can be done at any time. If you have elected to pay your health insurance premiums post-tax, you can drop coverage or people from coverage without a qualifying event. However, there are some commitments that must be met. Optional dental has a requirement to be kept for a minimum of 12 months prior to being able to be dropped, even if post-tax. Vision benefits, while post-tax, have their own commitment period of 1 year before it can be dropped unless you obtain it elsewhere or you terminate employment. This qualifying event selection should be used if you are trying to voluntarily drop a benefit and you are paying premiums on a post-tax basis. However, if you are dropping someone due to a divorce, for example, use that appropriate qualifying event option when making the selection. Other is a portal-specific selection that you can use if you're attempting to change your benefits, but the reason is not listed. Some examples would be if your spouse is entering the country and you need to add them to coverage, or you are moving from an AWAC or TPO1 position to a probationary full-time position, or you are returning from a leave of absence such as FMLA or workers' comp and are re-enrolling. Please enter a detailed description of the reason you are attempting to make changes. Also, please enter a good daytime phone number so that we may contact you if there are any questions or issues. Open enrollment is the annual season to submit add, drops, or changes for an effective date of January 1st of the next year. This option is available on the Employee Benefit Portal from October 1st to November 30th. Paper applications must be date stamped by your agency HR personnel or employees' group insurance by the deadline. Any required documentation for dependents must be submitted via the portal upload or to your agency HR personnel by December 30th, or you will be denied. Optional dental can be elected during open enrollment if you have satisfied the 3-year waiting period sometime in the current year. Vision can be elected during open enrollment if you have satisfied the 1-year waiting period. In closing, if you are unsure on what qualifying event to select or have any issues with the portal or application process, please do not hesitate to contact our office. Also, please see our PDF instructions on how to use the portal for qualifying event changes.